Every car hits a danger zone at 50,000 miles, where hidden wear starts quietly killing engines, transmissions, pumps, and sensors long before they show symptoms. Most drivers miss the warning signs and only discover the damage when the repair bill hits 4 digits. Do this at 50,000 miles, and you'll prevent the failures mechanics never warn you about. Let's start with the midlife service most cars secretly beg for long before the owner notices anything. Number 13. Change that lifetime transmission fluid at 50,000. Here is the truth many drivers learn the hard way. A transmission can feel perfectly smooth at 50,000 miles, while the fluid inside is already tired. The first hints show up quietly as a cold morning delay, a soft shudder at light throttle, or a lazy shift that feels slightly out of character. These are early signs that the fluid is reaching the end of its protective window. Transmission fluid works constantly. It moves through tiny passages, applies clutches, carries heat away, and keeps metal parts floating on a safe film. With enough miles, the fluid darkens, the additives weaken, and the heat from daily driving slowly changes its behavior. Differential fluid ages in a similar way. It collects metal particles and deals with heavy pressure every time you accelerate. By the time symptoms appear, wear has already started. Drivers often describe a short flare between gears, a firm thump when shifting into drive, or a humming sound from the rear of the vehicle. These problems grow slowly and often turn into expensive repairs. A simple drain and fill at 50,000 miles resets the chemistry before damage accelerates. Fresh fluid keeps the valve body responsive and the clutches clean. A service for the diffs and transfer case at the same interval protects gear surfaces and reduces noise at highway speeds. Treat transmission and diff fluid like essential maintenance at 50,000 miles. This keeps everything cooler, smoother, and far from the wallet-killing failures that show up later in the ownership cycle. Now let's move to a system that wears down in silence long before the pedal ever admits it. Number 12. Flush your brake fluid to avoid stuck calipers. Here is a quiet problem that grows in the shadows. Your brake pedal can feel firm and strong, while the fluid inside the system slowly fills with moisture. By 50,000 miles, that mix of heat, age, and humidity can change how your brakes behave long before any warning light appears. Brake fluid absorbs water with time. Once enough moisture gets in, the boiling point drops. Hard braking on a hill or in traffic can create tiny vapor pockets that make the pedal feel soft at the exact moment you expect full stopping power. Moisture also encourages corrosion inside calipers, ABS valves, and steel lines. You may notice the first hints during daily driving. The car may pull slightly during braking. A wheel may smell hot after a short drive. One rotor may turn a darker color from constant drag. Some drivers feel the car slowing down more than expected when coasting. These early signs point to calipers that are starting to stick. A full brake fluid flush at 50,000 miles clears out the moisture and restores a healthy boiling point. This protects the delicate valves inside the ABS unit and keeps caliper pistons sliding freely. Fresh fluid creates a safer pedal feel during sudden stops and reduces the chance of an expensive failure later. Treat brake fluid the same way you treat engine oil. Fresh fluid keeps the system cool, smooth, and responsive. A simple service at 50,000 miles prevents stuck calipers and keeps your braking strong in every situation. The next item hides inside your car's software, and it changes more about your drive than you expect. Number 11. Run a full software and TSB check. Here is a silent troublemaker many drivers overlook. Your car can run with harsh shifts, false alerts, or random stumbles, even though the factory already released a software fix for it. These issues feel normal at first. Then one day, the transmission bangs into gear, or the engine hesitates at a stoplight, and you wonder why the car suddenly changed its personality. Modern cars run dozens of control units. Each one runs code that controls shifting, throttle response, idle behavior, sensor sensitivity, and even how the ABS reacts to rough pavement. Over time, manufacturers study thousands of real-world cases. They release updated calibrations that refine shift timing, prevent stalls, calm down touchy sensors, and fix modules that refuse to sleep and drain the battery overnight. Drivers miss these updates because the car gives no clear message. There is no pop-up on the dashboard. The updates live inside technical service bulletins and dealer portals. A simple VIN check at 50,000 miles exposes the list of improvements for your exact car. You may recognize the symptoms: a rough 1 to 2 shift in the morning, a phantom collision alert on an empty road, a stall when rolling to a stop, a battery that dies after sitting for a weekend. These problems disappear in many cars after a software refresh. Treat this like a 50,000-mile checkup. Ask a dealer or a well-equipped independent shop to scan your VIN and update the major modules. This keeps your car smoother, safer, and far easier to diagnose if something new shows up later. The next stop reveals a weakness that often shows itself only when the temperature climbs. Number 10. Pressure test your cooling system before it ever overheats. Here is a quiet warning sign many drivers miss. Your coolant level may look fine and the temperature gauge may sit steady, yet a tiny leak can already be forming in a hose, a clamp, or the water pump. The first clue often arrives too late. One burst hose on a hot day sends the needle to red, and the engine starts cooking itself within seconds. A cooling system holds pressure to raise the boiling point of the coolant. When a hose softens, when a clamp loosens, or when a water pump seal starts to seep, that pressure falls. You may smell sweet coolant after parking, or notice a slow drop in the reservoir with no puddles. The leak evaporates on hot surfaces, so it hides in plain sight. A pressure test forces the system to reveal the truth. A technician pumps the system to the cap rating and watches the gauge. If the pressure drops, the leak shows up as a faint crust at a hose joint, a shine around a radiator seam, or a damp spot under the pump. This happens with the engine safely off, so nothing overheats during the inspection. 50,000 miles is when hoses age, clamps relax, and pumps begin to show early wear. A quick pressure test at this stage catches the small problems before they turn into a roadside steam cloud and a 4-figure repair bill. Give your cooling system this check before the first real overheat. It keeps the engine stable, protects the head gasket, and gives you peace of mind every time the traffic slows or the weather climbs. Before we move on, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the small habits that keep cars running strong past 100,000 miles. A little knowledge now saves a lot of money later. Number 9. Refresh your PCV system to stop midlife oil burning. Here is a problem that sneaks up on many owners. One day, the oil level looks fine. A few months later, the dipstick drops faster than you expect, and a faint blue puff drifts out of the tailpipe on startup. This is the moment when the PCV system shows its age. Your engine creates blow-by during every drive. Those gases fill the crankcase with pressure, oil mist, and fumes. The PCV system pulls those vapors out in a controlled way so the engine can breathe cleanly. After thousands of heat cycles, that small valve and the hoses around it collect sticky deposits. The system moves less air, and the crankcase begins to swell with pressure. You feel it through real symptoms. A film of oil forms around the valve cover. The idle gets uneven. The engine uses oil sooner than expected. Some drivers even hear a faint whistle from the valve cover area. These are early signs that the PCV system struggles to keep the crankcase under control. A refresh at this stage creates a clean reset. A new PCV valve meters airflow correctly. Fresh hoses seal properly and stop vacuum leaks. The engine holds a steady idle again, and the crankcase stays under gentle negative pressure. This prevents oil from being pushed past seals and slows the path that leads to blue smoke and heavy oil consumption. Treat a PCV refresh as midlife insurance. It protects the valves, the pistons, the catalytic converter, and every gasket that keeps your engine clean. A small service at this point keeps the engine healthy for the miles ahead. The next one exposes what happens when your valves try to breathe through a layer of baked carbon. Number 8. The carbon checkpoint that keeps GDI engines breathing clean. Here is where many modern engines start choking without any warning on the dash. The car still idles fine. it still pulls onto the highway, yet the intake valves slowly coat themselves in a thick crust that steals power and fuel economy long before you feel anything dramatic. Direct injection engines spray fuel straight into the cylinder. That design improves power and efficiency, but the fuel never washes across the intake valves. Oil vapors drifting through the intake settle on those cool valve surfaces. Heat cycles bake that film into hard carbon. After enough miles, airflow drops and the engine slowly loses its edge. You notice it through familiar midlife symptoms. Cold starts take longer. The idle hunts. The car hesitates when you ease into the throttle at a light. Highway passing power feels weak. Drivers often think the engine is getting older, even though the real reason sits inside the intake ports. A simple inspection at this stage gives clarity. A shop can look at the valves through the intake and see how heavy the deposits are. If the buildup is mild, a chemical cleaning helps. If the crust is thick, walnut blasting gives the valves a clean slate again. This restores smooth airflow and steady combustion, which improves cold starts, throttle response, and overall efficiency. Treat this as a midlife reset for any direct injection engine. It prevents misfires, helps protect sensors and the catalytic converter, and keeps the engine breathing freely for the miles ahead. Clean intake paths help power, but the next section shows how your suspension can quietly chew through tires. Number 7. The suspension geometry check that saves an entire set of tires. Here's the part most drivers miss. Your tires start wearing out long before you hear a clunk or feel anything dramatic. The front end joints slowly loosen with every pothole, every speed bump, and every curb scrape. By the time you notice the issue, the edges of the tires already look chewed and uneven. When bushings soften and ball joints develop even a little play, the wheels tilt and shift under load. Toe angle drifts as tie rods wear, and the tread begins to scrub the pavement instead of rolling cleanly. Weak shocks add bouncing that creates cupping across the tread. The car still feels safe enough to drive, but the tires lose thousands of miles of life. You usually see the signs during routine driving. The car wanders on the highway. The steering wheel sits slightly crooked. The tires hum or vibrate in a way balancing never solves. Inside edges burn away faster than the rest of the tread. These are early signals that the hardware is aging and the alignment has drifted. A deep dive at this stage makes a big difference. A tech can lift the car, check every joint, and look for cracked bushings, loose tie rods, and tired shocks. A proper alignment after these checks locks the wheels back into the angles the suspension was designed for. This keeps the new tires wearing evenly and gives you a stable, confident drive again. Treat this as a milestone service. It saves the next tire set, improves straight line stability, and keeps the suspension healthy for the long haul. The next one shows why the underside deserves a spotlight before corrosion makes the choices for you. Number 6. The underbody rust sweep that prevents silent failures. Here is the part of the car that causes the biggest surprises. The underside stays out of sight, and corrosion quietly eats into brake lines, fuel lines, and shields long before anything feels wrong from the driver's seat. By the time symptoms show up, the metal is already thinning, and the repair bill is no longer small. Road salt and winter brine act like acid on bare steel. They pack into clips, seams, and tight pockets above the fuel tank and rear axle. Every winter pushes the rust a little deeper. Once the factory coating wears off, the metal loses thickness and begins to pit. That is the stage where a line finally seeps or sprays fluid. You feel the first hints in ways that seem harmless at first. The brake pedal starts to feel a little soft. You smell fuel near the rear of the car after parking. A small metallic rattle comes from a loose heat shield. Sometimes there is a wet streak under the car that looks like condensation, but it is brake fluid finding a pinhole in a rusted tube. A lift inspection at this age paints a clear picture. A tech can follow every brake and fuel line, check unions and clips, look above the tank, and tap flaky areas to see what is still solid. Light surface rust gets cleaned and treated with a protective coating. Deep pitting gets addressed early before it becomes a failure point. Heat shields and brackets get tightened so nothing drops onto the exhaust. This habit keeps the structure sound, protects the brake system, and stops small corrosion patches from turning into dangerous leaks. It is one of the smartest midlife checks you can make on a daily driver that sees real weather. The next checkpoint reveals a weakness that announces itself only when the weather turns cold. Number 5. Charging system and battery load test before it strands anyone. Here is a problem that sneaks up on plenty of drivers. The car starts fine for months. Then one cold morning, the starter spins slow, the dash flickers, and the battery gives up with no warning. A weak battery rarely fails at home on a calm day. It usually waits for the worst timing possible. A battery ages from the moment it leaves the factory. After a few years, it holds less energy and reacts slower under load. Your alternator feels this instantly. It has to work harder, run hotter, and push more current just to keep the car stable. That extra stress is why alternators often fail shortly after the battery starts aging. You start to notice little hints. The headlights dim when you stop at a light. The blower fan drops speed when you switch on the rear defroster. The car cranks slower on some mornings and faster on others. These swings point to a battery that no longer has a solid reserve and a charging system that is carrying too much weight. Proper load test removes the guesswork. It simulates a real starting load and shows whether the battery can hold voltage when pushed. A charging test checks alternator output under normal and heavy electrical loads. Together, they reveal the real health of the system instead of the surface level reading on a cheap parts store tester. This simple check protects you from roadside breakdowns, jump-start emergencies, and early alternator failures. It keeps the electronics stable and gives your engine strong, confident starts on every trip. It is one of the most valuable midlife electrical checkups you can make. The next one shows what happens when your pump works harder than it should for far too long. Number 4. Fuel filter and pump saver service at the first midlife interval. Here is a quiet little failure that catches drivers off guard. The car feels fine around town, then the moment you ask for real power on a hill or a highway merge, it hesitates like it is running out of breath. That hesitation is the early sign of a fuel system that is struggling behind the scenes. Your fuel pump works hard every time you drive. It pulls fuel through a strainer, pushes it through the lines, and maintains steady pressure at the injectors. It also depends on clean, unrestricted flow to stay cool. When the filter starts loading up with rust or sediment, the pump has to force fuel through a smaller and smaller opening. Heat rises, current draw rises, and the pump starts to age faster than it should. You feel the effects long before the pump fails. Cold starts take longer. The engine stumbles when you accelerate up an incline. The pump begins to whine from the back of the car. Some mornings it fires right up, and other mornings it cranks slow and coughs. These swings usually point to a filter that has reached the end of its useful life. A fresh filter resets the entire system. It gives the pump a wide, clean path to send fuel and restores pressure under load. It also keeps debris away from the injectors and reduces the strain that kills pumps in hot weather or during long trips at low fuel levels. A simple 50,000 fuel filter service protects the most expensive part of the fuel system. Affordable step that gives your car stronger starts, smoother acceleration, and a cooler, healthier pump for the miles ahead. Now it is time to check the one system that affects comfort, airflow, and electronics in every season. Number 3. Cabin filter and evaporator. Clean to protect airflow, health, and HVAC electronics. Here is something drivers usually ignore until the smell hits. You turn on the AC and get that damp, dirty odor that makes you wonder what has been growing inside the dash. By the time that smell shows up, the problem is already deeper than a dirty filter. Your cabin air filter is the first line of defense. It catches dust, pollen, soot, and everything floating around in traffic. Once it loads up, airflow drops, and the blower has to work harder. You feel weak vents, louder fan noise, and slower defrost performance. The upstream side of the filter becomes a damp surface when the AC runs. That damp layer can feed mildew that spreads into the evaporator housing. The evaporator itself is the cold metal coil that cools the cabin. Moist air hits it, water forms on the fins, and dust sticks to that moisture. Over a few seasons, this turns into a mat of grime that insulates the coil and traps organic material. Cooling becomes slower, windows fog more easily, and the AC cycles longer. That extra runtime puts heat into blower motors, control modules, and resistors that all live inside the same housing. When the coil is dirty enough, the film can freeze into ice during long AC runs. You get intermittent cooling, water leaks on the passenger floor, and moisture creeping onto electrical connectors. A clogged drain can even let water pool inside the HVAC box. A 50,000-mile HVAC reset keeps the system healthy. Replace the cabin filter, clean the evaporator with a proper foaming cleaner, and confirm that the drain flows freely. Your car breathes cleaner air, cools faster, and protects the electronics that sit inside the dash. The next one is all about catching danger long before the first hum or vibration. Number 2. Wheel bearing and hub check before the noise starts. Here is a quiet failure that grows in the shadows. Your car can feel perfectly stable, yet one corner may already be wearing down its bearing every time you hit a bump or lean into a turn. The danger is that early bearing wear hides until it becomes a humming roar you hear only when it is almost too late. A wheel bearing carries the entire weight of that corner along with braking and cornering loads. When the rolling surfaces inside start to pit or wear, the wheel loses precision. You do not feel it at first. The bearing simply runs a little rougher and a little hotter. That heat speeds up wear and slowly turns a small flaw into a real problem. As the wear progresses, your car begins to send hints. You may notice a faint hum at highway speed that grows louder with mileage. You may feel a light vibration that you chalk up to old tires. In many cars, the ABS light comes on because the tone ring sits inside the hub and picks up irregular signals from a damaged bearing. These clues show up long after the bearing has already been stressed for thousands of miles. A simple on-lift check at 50,000 miles spots this early. Spinning the wheel by hand reveals roughness. Checking for movement at the top and bottom of the tire exposes looseness before it becomes a wobble on the road. A warm hub after a short drive can signal a bearing running hotter than its neighbors. Catching a weak bearing early saves you from ruined tires, unstable handling, and expensive repairs. A clean bill of health at 50,000 gives your car a stable foundation for the miles ahead. Now it is time to pull the whole picture together with a checkup that turns your car into a known machine. Number 1. The 50,000-mile baseline report that turns guesswork into control. Here is the truth most drivers miss. At 50,000 miles, your car enters a stage where small problems start hiding under the surface. A baseline report pulls every one of those secrets into the open before they become big bills or mystery noises. It feels like giving your car a full medical checkup instead of waiting for symptoms. You gather photos of the underbody, the brakes, the suspension, and every fluid. You record battery numbers, alignment printouts, and any stored codes. If the engine is older or running rough, you add a compression test. You now have proof of what is healthy and what needs attention. Shops work faster and cleaner when you hand them a documented history. They see past service patterns. They understand what has changed, and they stop guessing. You feel confident about every repair because it matches the record, not a random opinion. The payoff arrives at 100,000 and 150,000 when other owners are stressed. Your car has a clear health story, and you always know what comes next. Now that you know the smartest 50,000-mile habits, protect your engine from the fuel that slowly wears it down. Our next video exposes the gasoline brands to avoid. Tap here and choose wisely.